Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're all shook up about a true legend, Elvis Presley. You know, the king of rock and roll and the guy who basically defined 20th century's pop culture. Elvis wasn't just a music and film icon, he had style for days. We're talking slick hair, killer jumpsuit and an epic collection of watches.
That's right. Elvis had a larger-than-life personality and a watch collection to match. This man sold over 1 billion records and starred in 31 films, and apparently he loved to celebrate those milestones with some seriously cool timepieces. Today we're walking through Elvis' life and checking out the watches that mark his journey. From the army days to Vegas glory, every watch tells part of his story.
Before we even get to the watches, let's set the stage. It is early 1950s in Memphis, Tennessee. A young truck driver named Elvis Presley walks into the Sun studio in 1954 to cut a little record as a gift for his mom. That moment, total butterfly effect. It kicks off a career that changes music forever.
Yeah, Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Studio, hears this kid mixing country, gospel and blues, and he's like, if I can find a white man with the black sound and the black feel, I could make $1 billion. Well, enter Elvis. By 1956, Heartbreak Hotel hits #1, and suddenly this shy southern boy is a national sensation.
And not just musically. Elvis had a look, the hair, the moves, the flashy clothes, the way he shook his hips on the Ed Sullivan Show in '56, that caused TV networks to literally film him from the waist up. Imagine having moves so scandalous that cameras can't even pan below your belt.
That's when the legend started forming. In just 4 years, Elvis went from local singer to the king of rock and roll, with hit singles, gold records, movie deals, and the teenage fans screaming their lungs out at every show.
And here's where the watch connection begins. Even in these early days, Elvis liked a bit of style on his wrist. Photos from the mid-50s show him with simple dress watches, not yet the high-end Swiss pieces we'll see later, but you can tell he was already paying attention to accessories.
Exactly. And then, just as he's on the top of the world, in 1958, he gets drafted into the US Army. That's where our first major watch in his story comes in, the Omega Constellation he wore during his service in Germany. Let's talk about that beauty.
So, in 1958, at the peak of his early stardom, Elvis got drafted in the US Army. Can you imagine the most famous rock star suddenly having to buzz cut his hair and wear army greens? Fans were all shook up for sure, but Elvis took it in stride. He served as a regular soldier, no special treatment, and on his wrist through all of it, a trusty Omega Constellation.
Right, Elvis wore a gorgeous Omega Constellation while stationed in Germany. It was pink gold-plated steel with a sleek black dial, featuring a little crosshair pattern and a date window at 3 o'clock. Pretty classy for military wear, but hey, this is Elvis. Of course, he'd bring a bit of swagger to basic training.
And here's a cool story. In the army, Elvis met a fellow musician, Charlie Hodge, who became one of his closest friends. Charlie was actually wowed by that Omega. Elvis noticed and literally gave him the watch of his wrist. Can you believe that? Elvis was super generous. If he saw you admired something of his, there was a good chance you'd end up owning it.
I love that. Elvis basically said, "Here you go, man, take my watch." It shows how giving he was. Charlie Hodge treasured it, obviously, and decades later, that exact Omega Constellation hit the auction block and sold for tens of thousands of dollars.
Talk about a valuable friendship bracelet, right? I saw that Antiquarium auction listing. They confirmed the provenance with the photos of Elvis wearing it and a letter from Hodge, so nobody was gonna call that Omega a hound dog. It is a real deal.
In Elvis' film G.I. Blues, which was actually inspired by his time in the army, he even wears a watch that looks just like that Omega in some scenes. A little Easter egg for the fans, perhaps. By 1960, Elvis was back from the army and his career was hotter than ever. He was dropping hits, making movies and breaking records left and right. In fact, around Christmas 1960, Elvis hit an insane milestone. 75 million records sold worldwide. The folks at his label RCA Victor decided to celebrate their cash cow, their star, with a seriously luxe gift. enter the Tiffany and Company Omega.
This watch is something else. It is Omega dress watch in 14-karat white gold, but what makes it pop is the Tiffany co-branding and the 44 diamonds set into the bezel. Talk about shining like Elvis's smile. And on the dial, just under the Omega logo, it's stamped Tiffany and Company. Pretty rare to see the dual branding.
The best part is the personal touch. The case back was engraved to mark the occasion. To Elvis, 75 million records, RCA Victor 122560. So it was likely presented to him around Christmas 1960, although some say Elvis only received it in 1961. Either way, it's basically a platinum trophy you can wear on your wrist. Elvis must have loved it, and it's flashy and meaningful.
And here's a wild anecdote. Elvis didn't keep this watch for long. Story goes he met a man who loved that Omega, and Elvis, being Elvis, he traded the diamond Omega away in exchange for the man's watch, which was a diamond-studded Hamilton. Can you imagine? He's like, "You admire my watch? Sure, let's swap." It sounds unbelievable, but Elvis was known to spontaneous exchanges like that.
The traded Omega disappeared into private hands for decades. Then in 2018 it surfaced at a Phillips auction in Geneva and sold for a staggering $1.8 million, which was a record price for an Omega at the time. Omega's museum actually bought it, so now it's on display for everyone to admire. Elvis' generosity inadvertently made the watch one of the most famous Omegas in the world.
Really shows Elvis' personality, huh? 1 minute he's been gifted a one-of-a-kind Omega for being the top artist in the world. Next minute he's swapping it with the fan because he just felt like sharing love. Classic Elvis. Now, speaking of classic, our next watch is pure mid-century Americana, and it even co-starred with Elvis in Hollywood film.
Oh yes, the Hamilton Ventura. This watch is so cool and funky. It has an asymmetrical triangular case that just screams space age. Very fitting for Elvis, who was always ahead of the curve. He wore a Hamilton Ventura in Blue Hawaii, one of his big movies. Ever since, the Ventura has been nicknamed the Elvis watch, literally. Hamilton still markets it that way.
I mean, picture it. Elvis rocking a sharp Hawaiian shirt, strumming a ukulele, wooing the girl, and on his wrist is this wide-looking watch that looks straight off the Jetsons. It was actually the first battery-powered electric watch ever mass-produced, so it was high-tech for the time. Of course, Elvis would be sporting something cutting-edge. He had that kind of style.
The Ventura's design was bold and a little rebellious, kind of like Elvis himself. And it paid off for Hamilton. When people saw Elvis wearing the triangular watch on the big screen, they rushed out and the Ventura sold like hotcakes, over 11,000 units shortly after the film's release. Elvis basically gave Hamilton the best product placement ever.
Fun fact, Hamilton released a special edition called the Ventura Elvis 80 on what would have been Elvis's 80th birthday. So they still celebrating the king with that model, and the Ventura has shown up in other pop culture too. Men in Black, for example, but Elvis wearing it in Blue Hawaii is the original flex.
It's awesome how a watch from 1957 can still look futuristic. Just like Elvis' music still feels fresh, his watch choices were timeless. So we've seen Elvis Omega Bling and his sci-fi Hamilton, ready to move into the 70s, because the next watch we have is literally fit for a king. The King Midas, that is. And Elvis received it under some pretty epic circumstances.
By 1970, Elvis was back on stage, bigger than ever. He was doing huge concerts like those record-breaking shows at Houston Astrodome. The promoters were so thrilled that they decided to thank Elvis with a seriously over-the-top gift, a Rolex King Midas. And honestly, could there be a more perfect watch for Elvis than one named after a king that literally made of gold?
Not at all. The King Midas was a special Rolex model from the late 60s designed by the legendary Gerald Genta, the guy who later designed the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak and other icons. It was the most expensive Rolex you could buy at the time, a heavy, chunky ingot of 18-karat solid gold with a unique asymmetric case that sort of looks like a pentagon. Only 1,000 were made and Elvis was number 343 of the series.
Elvis received it after selling out 6 shows at Houston Astrodome in February 1970. The inscription on the back says, "To Elvis Presley from the Houston Livestock Show Officers, 1970", which basically marks that achievement. Imagine being in the audience, you've got Elvis in his fabulous jumpsuit on stage, belting out suspicious minds, and somewhere backstage someone's ready with this gold Rolex as a thank you. Talk about showmanship.
He actually posed for a photo with that watch, grinning and holding a big trophy too. You can see the King Midas on his wrist. It looks like a block of gold treasure. Honestly, the thing barely even looks like a watch. It's more like a piece of modern art or a bracelet until you spot the tiny dial. Genta really went avant-garde with it, which suited Elvis' flashy style perfectly.
And unlike some other pieces, the King Midas stayed with Elvis. It's now on display in Graceland, Elvis's hometown museum in Memphis. So if you visit, you can actually see that exact Rolex with its engraving. I kinda loved it. At Graceland, the King's golden watch resting in the King's castle. Fitting, right?
Absolutely. Elvis wearing a Rolex named Midas is big rockstar irony too. Everything is touched turned to gold, including his records, his outfit, and apparently his watches. Okay, from one Rolex to another, let's talk about a more rugged Rolex that Elvis rocked earlier in the 60s, one that James Bond fans will appreciate.
Surprising fact, Elvis didn't just wear dressy watches, he also had a Rolex Submariner 6538, the classic dive watch. Elvis was seen wearing his big crown Submariner in the early 60s, notably while filming the movie Girls, Girls, Girls in 1962, so the King of Rock was wearing the Spy's watch. Pretty cool crossover.
The Submariner is an icon. Late 50s era, no crown guards, a big 8mm crown, hence the nickname Big Crown, and a distinctive red triangle on the bezel at 12 o'clock. It's one of the most sought-after vintage subs today, and Elvis had one on his wrist while singing on a boat in that movie. You can spot it in some behind-the-scenes photos. It's like Elvis' subtle nod that he could pull off the rugged look too, not just the gold and glitter.
What's interesting is that unlike his other watches, we don't know much about how Elvis acquired the Submariner. There is not a lot of lore or engraved thank you notes on this one. It might have just been a personal purchase because he liked the watch, or even a prop he kept from filming. We do know he wore it around 1960s. Honestly, seeing Elvis with a sporty diary watch is kind of ahead of his time. Most celebs back then weren't into true watches for style, like people are today.
True, nowadays every celebrity has a Submariner or Daytona, but Elvis wearing a sub in 62 is pretty OG. And remember, this was the Bond watch at the time, so maybe Elvis, being the movie buff he was, got a kick out of that connection. Like, hey, James Bond and I have the same taste in watches. That's a flex you can't help falling in love with. Feast your eyes on these folks. In the 1970s, Elvis had Ebel, a Swiss luxury brand, create a unique watch just for him. It's unlike any other Ebel out there, a true custom piece. The design is super distinctive, a funky rectangular bob textured case, an entirely sculpted 14-karat gold bracelet, and no less than 26 diamonds set around the bezel. This thing is blingy as heck, even by Elvis standards.
I'm getting Liberace vibes, to be honest. It's definitely a showstopper. And what did Elvis do with this one-of-a-kind masterpiece? In classic fashion, he gave it away to the dear friend J.D. Sumner. Sumner was the the best singer of the Elvis backup group and a legendary gospel singer in his own right. Elvis gifted him the watch in 1974, complete with an engraving from the band that says, "From Elvis to J.D. Sumner, 1974. Talk about a heartfelt gift."
Imagine being J.D. Sumner. You've sung with Elvis for years, and one day Elvis just goes, "Here, I want you to have this custom gold and diamond watch I got made." And not only that, Elvis gave JD a matching gold ring at the same time. It's like he was giving him the full kingly regalia. This shows Elvis' generosity was on another level. He shared his success with the people he loved. The Ebel is like the crown jewel of Elvis' watch collection in a way, totally bespoke, dripping with diamonds and tied to a personal story. It's a work of art, like something a pharaoh would wear, which is fitting because Elvis was the king. By 1974, when he gave this away, Elvis' health was declining, but he was still all about showing appreciation to his friends in the flashiest way possible.
Absolutely, and that brings us towards the final chapter of Elvis' story, the later years and the legacy he left, both in music and maybe even in watch style. Let's reflect a bit on the end of his career and how these watches were talked about tie into the legend of Elvis Presley.
By the mid-70s, Elvis' life was like a roller coaster. He'd conquered music, made history with his 1973 Aloha from Hawaii global concert broadcast, and was basically the prototype for the modern Las Vegas residency artist. But he also struggled with health issues and the pressures of fame. Sadly, Elvis' career was cut short when he passed away in August 1977 at just 42 years old. It was the end of an era. Elvis has left the building for real.
It's hard to overstate his impact. Musically, he changed everything. He blended genres, broke down racial barriers in music, and inspired literally generations of artists. And style-wise, the man loved his fashion and accessories. Those jewel jumpsuits, the capes, the sunglasses, and of course the watches. Each watch we discussed today reflects the piece of Elvis' journey.
What's really sweet is that a lot of Elvis watches have been preserved. Some are in Graceland, some are in museums, some in the hands of collectors who no doubt treat them like treasures they are. Just like Elvis' music still gets played every day, his watches are still ticking away, or in some cases carefully kept, wound in display cases, and they've become part of his lore.
I was thinking, Elvis's habit of giving away watches kind of set a trend we see with modern celebs and their crews. Like how today rappers give their friends iced out Rolexes, or athletes give teammates luxury watches after championship. Elvis was doing that long ago, sharing the bling and spreading the love. He even had the TCB logo, taking care of business, designed into jewelry for his inner circle. So he really treated his people like family, rewarding them with mementos of loyalty.
So, what have we learned? If you're the king of rock and roll, you better have a royally awesome watch game. Elvis certainly did. From humble beginnings in the Tupela to global superstardom, he marked milestones with something shiny on his wrist. And each tick of those watches has a story of friendship, success, innovation, or gratitude.
Elvis's watches kind of remind us that he was not just a mythical figure, but a real person who liked cool gadgets and loved making people happy. He collected pieces of his era's finest watchmaking and then often gave them away in heartfelt moments. The generosity is as much as part of his legend as the jumpsuit or the ducktail hair.
And here we are, in 2025, still talking about these timepieces decades later. It goes to show Elvis' culture impact is timeless. Whether you're into music, movies, or watches, there's something about Elvis that grabs you.